We're going to get started with session 2. Welcome, Veronica and Jose and Jessa. I hope you had good conversations. I think we're off to a great start. So we're carrying on, of course, with our theme of the day, our larger theme, which is civic engagement, but now we're turning as well to the question of belonging. Not surprisingly, there's a lot of overlap between identity and belonging, so we will speak to that, but we will also try to pull out belonging in specifically. So Veronica, can you start us off with a little bit more about what the key brain, social, psychological developments are that are linked to belonging and how it might be different?
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you for the invitation to speak here. It's really exciting to hear from fellow panelists and to be part of this very important conversation. So when we think about young people and their brain development and their civic engagement and belonging, we have to think about how young people come from different backgrounds. So I think it was ideal that we followed the prior presentation that focused on the experiences of Native American young people. So when we're thinking about young people today, we have to consider the tremendous inequality here in the United States. Young people are under various levels of pressure and stress, and in some cases experience high levels of trauma. So, here in the United States, we have a broken immigration system where young people may be growing up in families that are mixed status or have undocumented parents or be undocumented themselves. We've seen growing economic inequality, and it's harder for young people to move up the socioeconomic ladder. We're facing a climate crisis. There's political polarization. There's attacks on racial, gender, and religious minorities. And as we all know, young people, in some cases, are facing some tremendous mental health challenges. And we see this particularly among low-income young people of color, Native American youth, African American, Latinx, Southeast Asian, Pacific Islander youth. But within these challenging contexts, there's opportunities for young people to engage in very powerful civic engagement and develop a sense of belonging that really transforms their own lives and their communities. And so I've got some slides. So over the last decade or so, I've followed grassroots youth organizing groups that engage low-income young people across the state of California in rural and low-income urban communities. And the young people who come from some of the most impacted communities, system-impacted communities, immigrant communities, have been at the forefront of some impressive efforts to transform systems. They've transformed their schools by demanding more resources for schools serving low-income young people. They've demanded more health and mental health services for their communities. They've demanded translation services for their immigrant and refugee communities, and they've won. They've won, and these are young people who, the system kind of threw away in some cases, but they've been able to impact social change, and they've been able to do so with the right set of comprehensive supports. So next page. So we have models here in California and across the country of interventions that have really deep impacts on young people who are most impacted by social inequalities. And as we know, adolescence is a time for significant development of the brain and recovery from trauma and hardship. And so in following organizations across California, I've realized that some provide really comprehensive supports that enable young people to be leaders and to become civically engaged in ways that have positive impacts. And these organizations kind of have three kind of buckets of programming and services. One is that they offer developmental supports, so they offer healing and self-care activities that really address some of the difficult emotional and other challenges that young people are facing. They offer tutoring, they offer referrals to different types of services, and sometimes they offer career development or other things that adolescents need to develop into successful, thriving young people. In addition to that, they offer what I call a critical civics education, or what some call political education, that really helps young people understand the root causes of problems in their communities. So when they're seeing violence around them, violence in their schools and their communities, they're not blaming their peers or their families or their neighbors, but they're understanding the systemic issues that are producing some of these social inequalities. When they're seeing low voter turnout rates, they're not blaming their families or their communities for not engaging politically, but are looking at the structural opportunities for themselves and for their community members to become civically engaged. And finally, because my research focuses on low-income young people, I find that it's really important to provide hands-on guidance and training on how to become civically engaged. This could be from helping young people find their voice and speak in meetings and public arenas, to organizing events, to learning how to get on the phone and speak to voters who are adults and older than them, and explain to them why it's important to vote. And all of this creates a sense of community, a sense of purpose. It's so important in adolescence, and a sense of belonging in their communities. And we're lucky to have a great example from Loud for Tomorrow that really shows how young people's leadership gets developed so that they can lead social change efforts.
Thank you, Veronica. That's a great start. And I'm going to invite Jose to talk about the program that you have with Loud for Tomorrow. I just want to point out that unlike in our other sessions, this is one where our researcher has a relationship with the program. And so I think Jose is probably going to tell us a little bit about how he got inspired to do this work, and Veronica's the answer.
Yeah, thank you so
Please,
much
yeah.
To the UCLA Center for Developing Adolescents for having us here. It's been an amazing time to get to know folks around the room. So my name is Jose Salvador Orellana. My pronouns are he, him, they, them. I am the executive director and co-founder of Loud for Tomorrow. We are a youth-led power-building organization based in the Central Valley of California, specifically in Delano. If you drive up the 99, you will see us there. And we're known for being the birthplace of the farm labor movement.
You Californians had to get the highway in there, right? That's
Yeah.
another.
You guys have to. We are a pit stop, and for good reasons. Loud for Tomorrow, we are a youth-led organization. We provide young people with opportunities and skills so they're able to build their power and that we're able to create change. And we do that through youth organizing, policy advocacy, and community healing. We've been operating since 2018, and I want to share a little bit about that story because it'll illustrate the points that Dr. Terriquez has been making. So I started in this work. I slipped and fell into youth organizing. In 2018, when I was an undergrad at UC Santa Cruz, I saw this flyer that said, Central Valley Freedom Summer, Participatory Action Research Project. There's a $5,000 stipend. And I was like, I don't know what any of this means. I know it says Central Valley, which is my home, and being in Santa Cruz for 2 years, being the only Latino student in my dorm, I felt the calling to just take a picture of this, because I was yearning for community, people who looked like me, who came from the same background as I did. I'm a Salvadorian. I come from a Salvadorian background. My parents we have mixed status, and I needed that. So I signed up. I took these classes with Dr. Terriquez, where she explained to us the power of social movements. She explained to me for the first time the real history of the farm labor movement, how actually Filipino farm workers were the ones who started the work and then joined forces with a Mexican farm labor organizers like César Chávez and Dolores Huerta. I learned for the first time the different levels of making change. So I learned about what policy advocacy means, how research plays into movement building. And later that year, I was able to go back home that summer to do in-person voter registration and community organizing with the local environmental justice organization. And that's where there's a light bulb. And actually the bulb kind of exploded because I finally understood why my community was the way it was. Delano and the Central Valley are the epicenter of being the highest and the worst categories of social and economic determinants of health. In my own city, Delano, we have the worst air quality in the nation. We also have one of the highest levels of toxic water in our environment, and Kern County in general has the lowest college education attainment rate in the state of California. And all that came to me through this internship, and I was able to understand the underlying systems that made that happen. Why our budgets were $100 million were going to the police force. And I was able to question a lot of the things like, why do we have such a high budget for policing but not enough for schools? Or why is there a gap in mental health resources? And why aren't young people allowed to vote for their school board members, even though that body controls their everydays? So that whole summer just really was an eye-opening experience for me, and that's what gave me the opportunity to found Loud for Tomorrow and to create opportunities that mirror that experience that I had for people like Jessa, for young people like Jessa who come from similar backgrounds like myself, who are just yearning to create change and to understand the world and community view. So I'll leave it as that because I could continue going, but I'll let Jessa share her wonderful story.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jose. That's so inspiring and so clearly about belonging. Really interesting. So Jessa is part of Loud for Tomorrow as well. So why don't you tell us a bit about your own experience of this and how it helped you find a sense of belonging and of who you are.
So hi everybody, thank you again for the invitation. I feel very honored. My name is Jessa, I use she, her pronouns. I'm currently a senior here at UCLA now, but I got involved with Loud for Tomorrow my sophomore year of high school. I also kind of slipped and fell into organizing because a friend of mine was like, do you want free pizza? I was like, yes. And
honesty, we love it.
And I happened to kind of miss like the after school lunch program because I had to go to tutoring because like Jose mentioned, there's not a lot of support programs for the youth in my community. And so you kind of have to pick and choose between eating lunch after school or going to free tutoring. And so it started with just going to general body meetings. Again, food was an incentive, but
journalists are that way too, by the way. We go where there's free food. So.
I understand. But so it started with general body meetings, but the more that I went, the more I kind of realized like, with the social and political education that Loud for Tomorrow was providing, I got to learn about a lot of things that you don't learn in the textbook. For example, again, I didn't know that the farm labor movement was initially created by Filipinos, and then that's when Latinos kind of joined in the movement. And I didn't know, again, the root causes of why we went through the things that we went through as young people. Why was there a lack of resources for young people? Why was there a lack of support programs? Why did we have to, I guess, balance work and going to school at a very young age because we have to help out our parents. And at that young age, it's very hard not to internalize these struggles and blame yourself for them or like blame your family, like, oh, this is your fault, this and this and this. But once I got involved with Loud for Tomorrow and the more that I learned about the power structures and the systematic inequities that are built in the system, the more I understood, like, I am a product of my environment. I am a product of the context in which I live in. And from then on, I kind of learned my own voice, and the importance of my own story. And I kind of want to go back to the first campaign that I was involved in with Loud for Tomorrow. Like both Dr. Terriquez and Jose mentioned, there is a lack of mental health resources in our community. And it was, again, my sophomore year of high school, and they first introduced this campaign like, oh, do you get enough support with your mental health? And a lot of students were saying no, and then we later found out that there's only one psychologist rotating within 3 schools in the district, and that is never enough. So you kind of have to, it's this competition of getting mental health support. And from then on, we shared our own stories regarding our mental health challenges. And again, coming from a predominantly low income and immigrant community where there's a lot of mixed status families and undocumented students and their families, there's a lot of generational trauma that is unaddressed. And without those resources, you kind of are left in the dust of like, what do I do? How do I navigate life with these unspoken and unaddressed traumas? So from then on, with sharing our stories, we kind of validated each other and what we experienced. We got the affirmation that we didn't get from other people, especially from staff from the school, and school administrators who kind of took our issues as like us complaining. So I was able to join the mental health campaign. We advocated for an expansion of mental health resources in our community. But from that, there's a sense of solidarity that made me feel less isolated in my own experiences, which contributed to my own personal sense of belonging. And I was able to engage civically without fear of being dismissed or ignored, which was very new to me as a young person, to be able to be listened to without being judged or without being, again, ignored. So,
thank you for sharing that. It does sound so powerful. I wonder if it was like a light bulb for you, or if it took time for you to find that confidence to take those risks. I know we're going to talk about risk taking later, but let's go there, since that's what you were just, I think, was really interesting about what you were saying.
Yeah, I'll go first to give you some time to breathe. That was amazing. You slayed that. You have to relate with young people, so you have to use their language, is what I've learned. So for me, it was definitely not a light bulb moment. It definitely took me a lot of tries to finally feel confident in being able to speak my voice and to pull in that power that has been in me. And it's similar to our young people. It usually takes around 6 months to finally get them from a new student, a new member, to someone who's fully in their power, who is able to articulate their words, and who has the confidence to step up to City Hall. And that's what I found as general practitioner.
My regression results demonstrate that as well.
Amazing. But yeah, similar to Jessa, it took you like 6 months too to fully be leading some of our meetings. And I think what I've learned, to make that happen, you have to be more than an organizer. You have to be a mentor. You have to be a friend. You have to be a coach. You have to provide the guidance and leadership development skills and opportunities to give young people that space to develop in where they feel confident and powerful in themselves to advocate for themselves and for their community. Because those are two different things that I've learned that needs to come in that order. They need to advocate for themselves and then for their communities. Yeah.
Interesting. Jessa, do you want to speak to your...
As Jose mentioned, it did take me a while to also step in as a leader. I think a bulk of my confidence fostered once I became an alumni. So I kind of went through this transition of being a participant to now being a leader, leading a new younger generation to how to advocate for themselves. And I felt personally empowered in teaching other young folks how to use their own stories to advocate for themselves and their needs. Once I saw how important my voice was, I gained a lot of confidence in that. And teaching a new generation how to stand up for themselves, and kind of coming from, a place of being a learner back when Jose was my own mentor, to now being a teacher, but also learning from a new generation. I felt this confidence of, okay, I have both the knowledge, both my knowledge and knowledge of other people, and that gave me the perspective of understanding people's different experiences and different identities. And that contributed to my sense of belonging personally, because it reinforced this idea that creating a new generation of people who were once like me creates this community that has this investment and commitment to advocating for one another, and again, looking out for each other.
Thank you for sharing that. Veronica, can you speak to how your research maybe addresses this question? You said it briefly, but I'm curious more. I mean, I think it's so interesting to hear them. I can imagine the beginning of the first thing is you belong and this is for you, but then it takes time to really feel that and then find your confidence, I assume, out of that feeling.
Right. And I want to just reiterate that civic engagement opportunities look different in more affluent communities than in lower income communities where young people have fewer opportunities to find their own voice. So in my research, what I found that in communities where there's limited opportunities for young people to do after school programs, or they have to start working at a young age, it really takes a scaffolding approach to support young people in finding their own voice. It might just start out with young people speaking in small groups before they're able to run meetings, before they're able to speak at a city council meeting or school board meeting, before they're speaking at rallies with thousands of people. And that could happen. And I've interviewed young people who have said, I was shy, I never wanted to speak in public, I would hide when I was asked to speak. And later on, they're giving these brilliant interviews on, national television. So it's possible to support young people who experience hardship and trauma during adolescence and be able to support their impressive growth within a matter of 6 months, and then after a whole year, there's no stopping them.
So what are the emergent questions that about civic engagement and belonging that we all need to be working on in our different areas here? So, maybe Jose, you can start. How do you think, for instance, when you hear the science, what do you want? Are there things that occur to you that you would like to see more of or more research on? Or how does it relate to what you think we still need to do?
Yeah, I think for me, coming from the community-based organization side, I want to learn more how to work with other governments and school districts to be able to work together in the best interest for young people. I think there's definitely a lot of room for improvement. I remember when I went into high school, my civic education, it was just one-sided or just one level. And I feel like we could, as community-based organizations, as governments, we could work together to give a full picture and a sense of ownership and experience, hands-on experience, to be able to provide those opportunities. I think for myself, it wasn't until I came back to my community and I had experience on campaigns, I had experience in doing voter registration, it finally gave me that perspective that I needed. And I feel like there needs to be research, best practices on how do we work together. Sometimes it's difficult because at times as organizations were running campaigns that sometimes asks these bodies to do better, to spend more for us, and that's where it gets tricky. And I want to learn how to navigate those tensions, because at the end of the day, we're all here for young people to support them. And yeah, I want to learn more about that.
And it strikes me that the groups that you're speaking of that need to come together, the adults in those arenas may not really understand what it is to work with young people or what is going on with young people. Right? Has that been your experience, Jessa? I don't.
Yeah, I was I was gonna say, like, I think I'm very curious how to close the gap between younger people and older generations, and how instead of this narrative of like old versus young, how can we make it so that they collaborate with one another, and how we can use both their knowledges from different generations to create change. So kind of find the in-between, and not focus so much on like the differences, you know. How do we make it less polarizing? How do we cultivate an environment where we can navigate issues and challenges together instead of being pitted against one another because of our own experiences and the different generational differences, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So Jessa had mentioned how her organization, Loud for Tomorrow, held kind of like these healing circles or discussions where young people shared their own experiences. And that, I think, created a sense of belonging among the members of Loud for Tomorrow. And I've seen this occur in youth organizations across the state as well, where they're really kind of unpacking the challenges that they faced, but the adult or young adult facilitator then introduces a campaign in the process. Like, okay, we have all these community problems. Let's say we don't have enough mental health resources. How do we advocate for more mental health resources and channel that energy into impacting change? Mm-hmm. Now, one of the questions that I have is trying to understand what that balance is. What do these healing circles look like so that they remain healthy and lead to pro-social behavior and to activism? And there needs to be a balance, because I've also seen that sometimes young people are re-traumatized in these discussions. And so it's a matter of figuring out the right ways to facilitate these discussions and ensuring, you know, what kind of supports need to be in place. And so, you know, I'm not a psychologist, I'm a sociologist, but there's some questions around the nature of those discussions that need to be unpacked for the mental health and well-being of young people.
Yes, that sounds critical. And I mean, it goes back to what you had on the slides about the kind of scaffolding and support that we bring. I wonder if there's another example, like your mental health story, of a campaign where you felt that, or where you can tell us, you know, a little bit more about what you've done and how it has spoken to these issues.
Yeah, one of our most popular programs is our Summer Liberation Academy. It is a 3-week leadership development boot camp style, where we bring in students who are first-time members over the summer for 3 long weeks to give them a whole overview of what Loud for Tomorrow is, all of our campaigns. We give them workshops around art, culture, healing, phone banking, campaigning, everything that they need to be able to carry a campaign and to recruit young people in their schools. And what I've seen in those experience in that boot camp is just similar to what Jessa mentioned, is the Central Valley is a rural community. So for these young people, we're bringing them together after school during the summer, providing them a paid incentive. They have a stipend, so they don't have to choose between going to work in the fields. They're getting paid for this leadership development opportunity. And they're coming in with, for the first time, feeling like they have a home, like they're a third space. It's not school, it's not home. It's a safe space for them to talk about things like mental health, around sex ed, around I don't know what I'm gonna do after college. And at the same time, we're giving them those critical thinking skills, that political and civic education for them to understand why that is. Why aren't we talking about sex ed? Why don't we have enough mental health therapists? Why does it take you 3 weeks to see someone? And then we allow them, we give them the tools to express that. Sometimes it's campaigning, sometimes it's journaling, it's making art. And those spaces, having that combination of programming makes them feel home and makes them feel safe. And that's what we really want for first-time young people. We want them to have recognition of myself, of people like Jessa, so that we could build them up from there. And we could start connecting the dots between their individual lived experiences and the systemic issues that need to be changed. So that's one of our programs. It's been running for the past 4 years, and it started as just a need of having a space for young people outside of school during summer break.
And Jessa, I think you both participated and then have been a leader in this program, right? Would you like to speak to how it's been for you on both sides of it?
So my first year doing SLA, I was a participant. And, you know, I gained a lot of skills regarding organizing, about social and political education regarding the systems and the little infrastructures that govern, you know, our community and all that stuff. And I also were able to learn different healing practices. You know, what do you do when you're feeling this type of way? Who can you go to? What kind of resources do you have access to, and all that stuff? And that was my perspective as a participant. I mostly was able to engage in conversations with other peers regarding their own experiences, and we were able to, again, validate each other, affirm each other's experiences and our own challenges.
Were these kids you already knew or not?
Some of them, but most of them were from different high schools as well. So I was able to build more meaningful relationships, to which contributed to my sense of belonging even further, because I'm like, oh, there's another person like me who went through the same thing as me from another school, you know? And then from the perspective of someone who led these SLA, or the Summer Liberation Academy, I think I led it twice for 2 summers, and that was a huge shift, but in a good way, because now I was able to share my experiences to a younger generation, and I could just feel how validated they feel knowing that someone who's leading these workshops, who's leading these healing practices, also went through the same through the same thing as them, and just seeing how, you know, as Jose mentioned, it's a 3-day or 3 weeks academy, and seeing their growth from the first day where they're barely talking to one another, where they're barely like sharing with each other, to the last day of academy, and all of a sudden they want to participate voluntarily. It's very beautiful to see, because the same way I went through it, they also went through this development of emotional security, where they felt safe and accepted in who they were and in the experiences that they hold.
And just to finish up, would you like to speak, Veronica, just to how this kind of program speaks to what you think needs to happen?
Well, I think there needs to be deep investments in these type of programs, both within schools and outside of schools, to really provide the comprehensive supports that young people need, not only for their health, mental health, and other developmental needs, but that critical civics education to be able to analyze the root causes of problems in their communities is central to then enabling them to advocate for change. And the young people do need guidance on the various steps on how to change policy or get out the vote, because it's something that many adults don't know how to do in a way that's strategic and
I'm sure you've
effective.
seen the news about the tests. Adults don't know civics. There's a whole lot we don't know. Fourth graders are better than most adults, I think.
And
civics.
so I've seen high school students that understand school district policy or city policies more than
Right.
adults, and how to change them. And so this is a promise of adolescence. If you provide them the right guidance and support, they can be very powerful leaders.
Right. Well, thank you all so much for this and sharing your stories. That was great.